Welcome to the Diadem. We are a small group, and I've written a book. This book was written to capture my journey from a lifetime of forced astral attack to poltergeist activity, navigating through the wolves of the corrupt and sold out church and the BS New Age, and finally, through a very small Bible study group and what we've learned. Believe me, I'm pissed right off. In the future, we're going to add controversial and truth-seeking Bible study series based on the lessons learned in this book. We may not have all the answers, but we've got a lot of them. And we hope you join us with an open mind. The promise of God to David regarding the Messiah coming from his seed is a cornerstone of biblical prophecy and fulfillment. This divine promise, known as the Davidic covenant, is pivotal in understanding God's redemptive plan and the lineage of Jesus Christ. The Davidic covenant is first introduced in 2 Samuel 7:12-16. God assures David that after his days are fulfilled and he rests with his ancestors, God will raise up an offspring from David's own flesh to succeed him. This offspring will establish a kingdom, and God will be his father, and he will be God's son. This promise extends beyond the immediate context of Solomon, who would build the temple, to a far greater fulfillment in the Messiah, whose kingdom would be eternal. God declares, "Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." This covenantal promise is reaffirmed in the Psalms. In Psalm 89, 3-4, God states, "I've made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David, my servant, that I will establish your line forever and make your throne firm through all generations." This psalm highlights the perpetuity of David's lineage and the enduring nature of his throne, reinforcing the divine commitment to David's house. Further emphasizing this promise, Psalm 132:11 records, "The Lord swore an oath to David, a sure oath he will not revoke. One of your own descendants I will place on your throne." This verse underscores the irrevocable nature of God's promise, assuring David that his descendant will occupy that throne. In the New Testament, the fulfillment of the Davidic covenant is evident in the genealogies of Jesus. The Gospel of Matthew opens by tracing Jesus' lineage back to David, establishing his legal right to the throne of David. It begins with, "This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, son of Abraham." And this record is critical in presenting Jesus as a legitimate heir to David's throne. The angel Gabriel's announcement to Mary in the Gospel of Luke further affirms this fulfillment. In Luke 1:32-33, Gabriel tells Mary he will be great and be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. This divine proclamation highlights Jesus' eternal reign and his rightful place on David's throne. Royal diadems in kingship in biblical times were inherently patriarchal, signifying the passing of authority and blessings through the male lineage. The blessings of Abraham were also patriarchal, emphasizing the inheritance through his male descendants. Thus, the lineage of Jesus to David can't be validated through Mary, as traditional genealogical and royal claims required a direct paternal line. Now, the promise of God to David about bringing forth a Messiah from his seed is a profound testament to God's faithfulness, an overarching narrative of salvation history. This covenant not only assured David of his lineage's perpetuity, but also laid the foundation for the coming of Jesus Christ, who fulfilled this promise through his life, death, and resurrection. Jesus' connection to David's lineage is crucial in understanding his role as the Messiah and the eternal king, filling the divine promise made centuries earlier. Now, as a side note, the genealogies of Luke and Matthew don't match. But what you'll notice when you dig deeper into the Greek and other languages, and also the history of redactions and edits and corruptions, you'll see that Luke immediately gives us the line from Joseph back to David. And that would be useless to give us Joseph's lineage to David if Joseph isn't Jesus's father. So I want you to put a pin in that and keep that in mind for future Bible study sessions when we go over Luke in detail. Now, the reality of Judah's wickedness. Meet the Messiah. He isn't Judah's lion that millions or billions, basically every single end times Christian, is waiting for. You can follow that guy if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it. Judah's story in the Bible is one marked by significant moral complexities. Although he is one of the patriarchs of the Israelite tribes, his actions reveal a darker side to his character. Genesis 38 provides a detailed account of Judah's behavior, particularly in relation to his family. Judah's two eldest sons, and Onan, were struck down by God for their wickedness. Genesis 38:7 states, "But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death." And in 38:10, what Onan did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. So Judah's first two sons were struck down by God. This alone casts a shadow over Judah's lineage, highlighting the moral failings within his household. But wait, it gets worse. Judah's own actions further complicate his narrative. When his daughter-in-law, Tamar, was left widowed after the deaths of his two sons, Judah failed to fulfill his promise to give her in marriage to his youngest son. So in an act of desperation and perhaps seeking justice of some sort, Tamar covered her face with a veil and disguised herself as a cult temple hooker and conceived twins, Perez and Zerah, with Judah, who picked her up on the side of the road to fornicate with her. When he discovered he was the father of the shamed Tamar, he called for her to be burned. Genesis 38:24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of immorality, and as a result, she is now pregnant." And Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned." So this verse highlights the immorality associated with Tamar's conception and Judah's harsh reaction as she resorted to prostitution to secure her place in Judah's family. So this lineage was birthed from immorality. I recall hearing preachers in churches and the narrative as it stands, Jesus has a perfect lineage. Not if he sure doesn't if he's from Judah, he ain't. This incident was marked by deception and immorality, further tainting the lineage. The Bible explicitly states the descendants of Judah were conceived in immorality. Yet we're to believe this is the line of Jacob that God chose to birth the Messiah through this wicked and immoral lineage? But Judah's actions don't stop there. He's also the ringleader in the sale of his brother Joseph into slavery to the Ishmaelites, often related to the ancestors of the Arabs, a decision driven by jealousy and greed. This act of betrayal set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to the Israelites' sojourn and eventual captivity in Egypt. Now, the birth of Judah's sons, Perez and Zerah, is particularly notable for the strange detail of the scarlet thread. As Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law, pretending to be a whore, was giving birth, one of the twins extended his hand, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around it to mark him as the firstborn. However, the other twin, Perez, was born first, complicating this distinction. In Kabbalistic tradition, a red string wrapped around Rachel's tomb is believed to provide protection and blessings. Traditionally, this practice is viewed as invoking Rachel's maternal protection. However, this explanation makes little sense. Rachel was not the mother of Judah. Leah was. So why would Judah, or the sons of Judah, seek blessings and protection from the lineage of his rival? Let's take a closer look at this long-standing rivalry of the wives of Jacob. The relationship between Rachel and Leah, the two sisters married to Jacob, is fraught with tension and rivalry. Jacob loved Rachel deeply, having worked 7 years to earn her hand in marriage, only to be deceived by Laban, her father, into marrying Leah first. This forced deception led to Jacob working an additional 7 years to marry Rachel, whom he truly loved. Genesis 29, 20 through 30, Leah, feeling unloved and overshadowed by her sister, named her children to reflect her hope for Jacob's affection. For example, she named her firstborn Reuben, saying, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." Genesis 29, 32. Despite bearing several of Jacob's sons, Leah continued to struggle with her desire for Jacob's love and favor. Judah, Leah's fourth son, represents Leah's ongoing quest for recognition and significance within the family. The moral failings and complexities within Judah's lineage can be seen as part of the broader narrative of Leah's struggle and the resulting tension within Jacob's family. Now, Rachel, beloved by Jacob, was the mother of Joseph and Benjamin. Her lineage carried significant blessings and favor from God. Joseph's rise to power in Egypt and the blessings given to Ephraim by Jacob highlight the prominence and the favor bestowed upon Rachel's descendants. Given the moral failings of Judah's sons and the circumstances of Tamar's conception, the act of wrapping a red string around Rachel's tomb likely symbolizes an attempt not to seek Rachel's protection, but to bind her lineage due to a desire to contain and mitigate the influence of Rachel's sons, favored with divine election, perhaps due to the perceived threat or rivalry between the descendants of Judah through Leah and those of Joseph through Rachel. Rachel's son Joseph and his descendants played significant roles in Israel's history, often standing in moral and spiritual contrast to Judah's line. And we see this play out in the dramatic scene in Genesis as Jacob himself passes on a right-hand blessing of the covenant to Joseph's son. So let's talk about the Abrahamic covenant and Ephraim. The right-hand blessing that Jacob bestowed upon Ephraim holds profound significance in biblical history, particularly in the context of the promises made to Abraham. When Jacob, also known as Israel, blessed Joseph's younger son Ephraim with his right hand, he symbolically elevated Ephraim above his older brother Manasseh, signifying a transfer of primacy and greater blessing. This act of placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, despite Joseph's initial protest, indicated God's sovereign choice and favor. And the right hand, often associated with power and authority, underscored Ephraim's destined prominence among the tribes of Israel. You can see all this in Genesis 48, 13 through 20. The blessing was intrinsically tied to the Abrahamic covenant, which promised land, seed or descendants, and a multitude of nations. Ephraim's lineage was prophesied to become a multitude of nations, echoing God's promise to Abraham in Genesis 17, 4-5, where God declared that Abraham would be the father of many nations. By blessing Ephraim, Jacob affirmed that the covenantal promises of land, seed, and descendants would be fulfilled through Ephraim's line, marking him as a pivotal figure in the continuation of God's covenantal plan. Additionally, Genesis 48:22 notes that Jacob gave Joseph an extra portion of land. Moreover, I've given to you, rather than your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow. This specific allocation of land highlights the tangible inheritance associated with the blessings, further solidifying Ephraim's significant role in Israel's history and God's covenantal promise. Now, notably, of all the blessings recorded in Genesis 48 and 49, Ephraim's is the only one in which Jacob specifically named the patriarch, saying, "By you shall Israel invoke blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh," Genesis 48:20. And the explicit mention underscores Ephraim as the chosen son to carry out the threefold Abrahamic covenant of land, seed, and multitudes, highlighting his unique role in the fulfillment of divine promises. Now, Genesis 49:10 prophesies, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes." A key word here, as discussed in our vocabulary section, is being until. The badass Messiah, Shiloh, is going to come and take that law-giving scepter away from Judah. Now, I'm not sure what's wrong with people if they don't know what the word until means, but the paid preachers sure like to leave that part out. So either A, every preacher is illiterate, or B, every preacher is corrupt and nobody bothers to read their Bible. I'm going with corrupt because John 10 warned about this. Genesis 49:10. If you look at the Hebrew transliteration and the translation, you'll see, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples." There's that word obedience again. And in Greek, if you look at the Greek translation, "The ruler shall not fail from Judah, nor the leader from his thighs, until the one comes who's reserved for him, and he shall be the expectation of the nations." Now, both verses clearly indicate that the authority would stay with Judah until Shiloh, the Messiah, comes, implying a significant change. This underscores the passage doesn't suggest that Judah will continue to hold the scepter indefinitely or that it will be passed on within Judah's lineage. So the question becomes, who is Shiloh? And what tribal bloodline is he from? Additionally, although all the sons of Jacob were Hebrews and played roles in God's redemptive plan, that was finished with the coming Messiah. The actual Abrahamic covenant itself was given to Ephraim, not Judah. In Genesis 48:19, Jacob, also known as Israel, blessed Joseph's younger son Ephraim, saying, his, Manasseh's younger brother Ephraim, will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations. This blessing signifies that Ephraim, who represents and leads the northern tribes of Israel, was chosen to carry forward the covenant promises, highlighting God's sovereign choice that transcends traditional expectations. Meanwhile, the Bible explicitly calls Judah's sons wicked and describes Tamar's conception as immoral. All of these elements contribute to the narrative of Judah's morally complex and flawed image and lineage. But this background knowledge enhances the understanding of the tension and dynamics within the family, especially in contrast to the favored lineage of Rachel's descendants. So, considering the wickedness and immorality of Judah's lineage and his failure to receive the blessings of the covenant that was handed over to Ephraim, it seems someone, or many someones, promoting this Judah narrative is lying. Jesus was born of the tribe of Joseph in the land of Ephraim, a small slope of mountain within Judah's territory, but not given to Judah, given to his favorite son, the tribe of Joseph through Ephraim, near where Jacob buried Rachel. Judah appropriated it, transforming it into Jerusalem or Bethlehem when Ezra came along and redacted everything to instill pride in Judah post-Babylonian captivity, manipulating records to enforce Pharisee laws on behalf of the Persians. Now, we are told who Shiloh is. He hails from the right-hand Abrahamic inheritance, one page earlier in Genesis 48, which is Ephraim Joseph. An article named The Prominence of Ephraim in the Joseph Narrative, authored by Stephanie Paulsell, explores the significance of Ephraim's blessing in Genesis 48. This was published in the Harvard Theological Review, one of the oldest scholarly theological journals in the United States. This work provides a really detailed analysis of Ephraim's elevated status over Manasseh. Paulsell, a faculty member at Harvard Divinity School with a bachelor's degree from Greensboro College and a PhD from the University of Chicago, examines both historical and narrative approaches to understand Ephraim's prominence. This article highlights the recurring biblical theme of younger sons often being favored over their elder brothers, a motif seen with Abel over Cain, Isaac over Ishmael, and Jacob over Esau. This narrative choice underscores the theological significance of divine election, where God's choices often subvert human expectations. The placement of Genesis 48 within the Joseph story is so crucial for understanding the theological implications of Ephraim's blessing. This emphasis on Ephraim reflects the broader biblical motif of unexpected divine preferences and the special role of Ephraim in Israel's history. Then we get to post-Babylonian redactors. After the Babylonian captivity, a group of scribes and redactors, often associated with Ezra and his contemporaries, took significant liberties with the ancient texts. Their goal was to consolidate power and instill pride within the Judahite community, Southern Kingdom here, by enhancing the prominence of the Davidic bloodline. These redactors meticulously crafted genealogies and historical accounts, particularly in the Book of Chronicles, which is a problem, to emphasize Judah's supremacy and connection to the Davidic lineage. The genealogies and chronicles are often seen as manipulated to serve a political, and theological agenda. By doing so, they aimed to legitimize the post-exilic leadership and assert their authority over the people on behalf of the Persian Empire. This manipulation of sacred texts created a skewed historical narrative, which often obscured the true lineage and significance of other tribes, such as Ephraim. In her book, The Ideology of the Book of Chronicles and Its Place in Biblical Thought, Sarah Japhet explores how the chronicler shaped the narrative to address the needs and concerns of the post-exilic community. Japhet's research emphasizes the historical and theological motivations behind the chronicler's choices, such as the emphasis on the Davidic line and the centralization of worship in Jerusalem. She also examines the literary techniques used to reinterpret earlier biblical texts and create a cohesive and inspiring history for the post-exile audience. An article entitled "The Migration of Ephraimite Families to North Judah," authored by Nadav Naaman, a renowned historian from Tel Aviv University, delves into the significant movement and settlement patterns of the Ephraimite families in ancient Israel. Naaman's comprehensive research provides detailed insights into how these migrations shape the cultural and religious landscape of the region. His findings highlight the migration of the Ephraimite families to North Judah and their settlement in the Bethlehem district. According to his study, these families, referred to as Ephrathites after their place of origin, played a crucial role in the socio-religious dynamics of the area. Now, upon settling in the Bethlehem district, these Ephraimite settlers identified the tomb of their ancestress Rachel near Bethlehem. This identification led to two conflicting traditions regarding the location of Rachel's tomb, one situated in northern Benjamin and the other in the Bethlehem district. Naaman suggests that the tradition of Rachel's tomb near Bethlehem dates back to the early Iron Age, reflecting the historical and geographical complexities of the region during that time. The migration and subsequent settlement of the Ephrathites in Bethlehem were pivotal, as their connection to Rachel and the region became really integral to their identity. This identification of Rachel's tomb underscores the deep historical roots and the cultural integration of the Ephraimite families within the broader Judahite territory. So, is this the very land inherited by Ephraim in Genesis 48 from Jacob himself, as he blessed Ephraim on his deathbed? The proximity of Rachel's tomb to Bethlehem Ephrath and its historical significance suggests that it could indeed be part of the broader territory associated with Ephraim's inheritance. I want you to go back to Genesis 48, where this blessing takes place. And what you'll see is Jacob is talking about the death and burial of Rachel on the road to Ephrath. Then he's interrupted. Then he continues on with the blessings, and he gives them this piece of land. But cohesively, his whole blessing speech is dealing with Rachel's death, where they buried her, and the land and the blessings in the Abrahamic covenant passed down through Joseph to Ephraim. Sarah Japhet, PhD, has an article, "Was David a Judahite or an Ephraimite?" Light from the genealogies presents evidence suggesting that King David might be more closely associated with Ephraim than Judah. She examines genealogical inconsistencies and literary techniques used in the Book of Chronicles highlighting several key points. She examines the genealogies of the Book of Chronicles and notes the inconsistencies and omissions that all suggest a possible manipulation of David's lineage to emphasize his connection to Judah, with motives to legitimize the Davidic line and centralize that worship in Jerusalem. She explores the historical context of the post-exilic period, arguing that the Chronicles' portrayal of David was influenced by the need to legitimize the Davidic line and centralize that worship. She highlights the techniques used by the chronicler to reinterpret these earlier biblical texts, and she suggests that these techniques were employed for the post-exilic audience. They collectively support the argument that David's associated with Judah may have been emphasized or even outright constructed by later redactors to serve specific ideological and theological purposes. Japheth then presents evidence that Ephraim, rather than Judah, is the true ancestor of David. She examines the genealogies of the Book of Chronicles, and as she does so, she notes that the chronicler is actually conflating two genealogies, one of Ephraim and one of Judah. This suggests that the chronicler may have manipulated those genealogies to emphasize David's connection to Judah. And additionally, she points out that the chronicler's portrayal of David and his lineage was influenced by the post-exile context. There was such a need to legitimize that Davidic line, and these historical accounts serve to create a cohesive and inspiring history for this audience. Her research emphasizes these historical and theological motivations, such as the emphasis of the line and the worship in Jerusalem. She examines the literary techniques to reinterpret, suggesting they were employed to create a narrative that emphasized Judah's supremacy and David's Davidic lineage. This evidence supports the argument that the portrayal of David's lineage was definitely manipulated to serve these ideological and theological purposes, and I would argue political purposes, obscuring David's true Ephraimite heritage. So let's look into this Ephrath puzzle and the Messiah's origin. Micah 5:2 says, "But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are too small among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is of old, from ancient days." Now, this doesn't say they're coming from the clans of Judah. This says he's coming from the Ephrathites, who are small among the clans of Judah. I want you to imagine the southern kingdom of Judah, okay? But this is before the collapse of the Davidic kingdom into north and south. So we've got this territory where eventually the southern kingdom of Judah will be. And so you have to think of tribal affiliations because it's pandemonium. It's way back in the day before King David. And so you've got these loose tribal affiliations. But that little slice of land, so Judah would be the area that the tribe of Judah is controlling. But within that, there's that small slice of land handed to Ephraim. And that's on the outskirts of Bethlehem, or the city that will one day become Bethlehem, sort of the unincorporated district outside of town. And then eventually, as history goes forward, the Judahites of Bethlehem and sort of absorb this little slice of land given to Ephraim within their boundaries and claim it for their own. Genesis 35:19 states that Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, which is outside of Bethlehem. Later in Genesis 48, Jacob's speech about burying Joseph's mother in Ephrath is interrupted when Joseph's sons come into the room. And Jacob stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim, blessing him and his descendants. In Ruth 1:1-2, Elimelech and his family are Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah, not Ephrathites of Judah, but Ephrathites from Bethlehem within Judah, not of the tribe of Judah. And they went to live in Moab. Ruth 1:22 and 4:11 mention Naomi and Ruth returning and producing children in Ephrathah, bestowing a name in Bethlehem. In 1 Samuel 16:1 and 17:12, David is described as the son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite or Bethlehemite, and Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, not of Judah. Luke 2:4 details Joseph traveling from Nazareth to Bethlehem, the city of David, because he was of the house and lineage of David. And John 7:42 reminds us the Messiah is descended from David and comes from Bethlehem. Joshua 19 reveals that a second village named Bethlehem was included in the territory of Zebulun, far, far to the north in the Galilee. And the Bible consistently differentiates between Bethlehem Ephrathah in Judah from Bethlehem and Zebulun, underscoring the significance of location rather than a tribal bloodline affiliation. Let's do a language study of in versus of in Hebrew and in Greek. So in Genesis 35:19, it says, so Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. And Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Ruth 1:2. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Again in Greek, they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah, not of the tribe of Judah. 1 Samuel 17:12, the Hebrew translation. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. And in Greek also, we see that in David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. Micah 5:2, Hebrew translation. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is of old, from ancient of days. And in the Greek, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, shall to be among the thousands of Judah. From you will come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel. So among the other tribes, there seems to be this one little set apart group of people in the territory of Judah, but not of the tribe of Judah. They're from this little slice of land in Bethlehem Ephrathah. Judah is locational rather than tribal. So linguistic analysis has profound implications for biblical interpretation. It challenges the traditional view that the Messiah must come from the tribe of Judah, suggesting instead that the emphasis is on the geographical origin. David, and thus Jesus, was from the tribe of Ephraim, who migrated south near the area of Rachel's tomb to a small area in the territory controlled by Judah called Bethlehem Ephrathah. And this perspective aligns with the Ephraimite heritage of David and Jesus, offering a broader and more inclusive understanding of their lineage and the fulfillment of biblical prophecies. The consistent message and mention of Bethlehem Ephrathah in these verses references a place within Judah, namely Bethlehem Ephrathah, rather than indicating tribal lineage to Judah. This distinction is crucial in understanding the lineage of both David and Jesus. It suggests that their identification with Judah is about their origin from a specific place within the territory of Judah, rather than their direct descendancy from the tribe of Judah. This perspective reinforces the importance of the Ephraimite heritage and challenges all the traditional views of the Davidic and Messianic lineage. This broader understanding highlights the significance of geographical origin, offering new insights into the fulfillment of biblical prophecies and all of these complex and intertwined histories of Israel's tribes. Now, the church's argument for Jesus' set-apart bloodline through Judah is complicated by the realities of Judah's character and actions. While the genealogies in the Gospels emphasize a royal and covenantal heritage, the stories in Genesis reveal a lineage marked by moral failings, deception, and wickedness. This challenges the notion of Jesus' set-apart bloodline being linked to Judah the tribe, rather than the tribe of Ephraim, the ancient Ephrathites in the region, and relies on corrupted genealogies from Davidic redactors in the Book of Chronicles. By examining these narratives, we gain a deeper understanding of the complex obscuring of Jesus' lineage. The claims of Christian Zionism, which emphasize a set-apart heritage linked to Judah, have got to be viewed in light of this complexity, as well as some modern political motivations. So, what's in a name? Well, the names themselves, Joseph, James, which is Jacob in Hebrew, and Jesus, or Joshua in Hebrew, are rich with biblical significance and thematic parallels, especially when considered within the context of the Ephraimite tribe. Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, shares his name with the patriarch Joseph, the son of Jacob, who's associated with the tribe of Ephraim in Genesis 48. The parallel underscores Joseph's role in providing for and protecting his family, much like the Ephraimite Joseph did for his family and the nation of Israel during a time of famine in Genesis 37 through 50. Now, James, the brother of Jesus and leader of the early Christian church in Jerusalem, shares his name with Jacob, the patriarch who not only fathered the 12 tribes of Israel, including Ephraim, but, as we have seen, passed the right-handed Abrahamic covenant down to him. This connection highlights James' foundational role in the early church, mirroring Jacob's foundational role in Israel's history, emphasizing the Ephraimite heritage again. And Jesus, whose name in Hebrew is Joshua, evokes the image of Joshua, the successor of Moses, who led the Israelites into the promised land. Joshua, who was from the tribe of Ephraim in Numbers 13:8, led the Israelites into a new era, much like Jesus did in a spiritual sense. Jesus is often seen as the leader of the second Exodus, guiding his followers into God's kingdom, much like Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land. This parallel emphasizes Jesus' role as a leader and deliverer, guiding his followers into that new spiritual promise, the new covenant, and highlighting the significance of that Ephraimite connection. Together, these names alone weave a tapestry of continuity and fulfillment, linking the New Testament figures to their Old Testament counterparts and highlighting their roles in the unfolding biblical narrative. This perspective not only reinforces the importance of the Ephraimite heritage, but also challenges traditional views of the Davidic and Messianic lineage. David holds a significant title as the firstborn, a term that emphasizes his preeminence and special status in God's plan. Psalm 89 states, "And I will appoint him to be my firstborn, the most exalted of the kings of the earth." This verse highlights David's elevated position among the kings of Israel, signifying his role as a leader and chosen one in the lineage of God's people. Similarly, the number 10,000 is associated with both David and Ephraim, underscoring their importance and prominence. In 1 Samuel 18:7, the women of Israel sang in celebration, saying, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s." This chant reflects David's military prowess and his status as a mighty warrior, which contributed to his renown and his leadership. The number 10,000 symbolizes a great multitude and is also connected to Ephraim in Deuteronomy 33:17, which says, "In majesty, he's like a firstborn bull. His horns are the horns of a wild ox, and with them he will gore the nations, even those at the ends of the earth. Such are the 10,000s of Ephraim. Such are the thousands of Manasseh." This verse highlights that strength and significance of Ephraim, paralleling the prominence of David. So both David and Ephraim are portrayed as pivotal figures in Israel's history, each associated with the number 10,000, symbolizing their might and divine favor. This connection underscores the broader narrative of God's covenant and the special roles assigned to these key figures and the fulfillment of his promises. David from Ephrath in Judah versus Saul the Benjamite. Now, the narrative of David and King Saul in the Hebrew scriptures presents a foundational struggle within Israel's history. David, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem in the region of Judah, hailed from the tribe of Ephraim. This lineage is significant as evidenced in Genesis 48, where Jacob bestows the covenant upon Ephraim, and in Genesis 49, which states, "Judah will hold the scepter until Shiloh comes." David's rise to prominence and his anointing as king marked the beginning of a new era for Israel, characterized by his adherence to God's will and his role as a shepherd of his people. In stark contrast, Saul, the first king of Israel from the tribe of Benjamin, represents a tragic figure whose disobedience and paranoia led to his downfall. Initially chosen by God through the prophet Samuel, Saul's failure to fully obey divine commands resulted in God rejecting him as king. Now, his relationship with David, whom he initially embraced but later sought to kill out of jealousy, underscores his inner turmoil and descent into darkness. Saul's opposition to David can be seen as a manifestation of his deep-seated insecurities and his divergence from the path God set for Israel. Saul's eventual downfall and death in battle set the stage for David's ascension and the establishment of his dynasty, which would later be seen as the lineage from which the Messiah, Jesus, would come. However, it's crucial to note that this Messiah, Jesus, was also from the tribe of Ephraim, aligning with the biblical prophecies, blessings, and covenants handed down by Jacob. The implications of David and subsequently Jesus being of Ephraim rather than Judah are profound, both historically and theologically. If David and Jesus were linked to Ephraim, it would challenge the traditional Judaic emphasis on the Davidic line's connection to Judah. This shift would necessitate a complete reevaluation of messianic prophecies, such as those in Genesis 49:10 and Micah 5:2, as well as end times narratives in Revelation, which have traditionally been interpreted to point to a Messiah from Judah, rather than Ephraimite Messiah from the land of Ephrath within the territory of Judah. It would also imply that the centralization of worship and the authority of the Davidic kingship, historically tied to Jerusalem and the tribe of Judah, demands to be reconsidered in the light of an Ephraimite heritage. This perspective would underscore the significance of Ephraim in the broader Israelite history, highlighting that tribe's contributions and its role in the northern kingdom of Israel. This new lineage could suggest a different understanding of the continuity and fulfillment of biblical promises, potentially altering theological interpretations and exposing the deep and vast corruptions of biblical truth in favor of ecclesiastical traditions within both Christianity and Judaism. The right hand blessing holds significant importance throughout the Bible, and it's deeply intertwined with the concept of divine election. This practice symbolizes favor, power, authority, and the conferral of special blessings from God to his chosen individuals or groups. So let's explore some key instances where this right hand blessing is highlighted and how it relates to divine election. Genesis 48:13-14. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. In this passage, Jacob intentionally crosses his hands to place his right hand on Ephraim, the younger son, and his left hand on Manasseh, the firstborn. This act signifies the preferential blessing of Ephraim over Manasseh, symbolizing divine election and favor beyond the conventional expectations of the right of the firstborn. It underscores that God's choices are not bound by human traditions, but based on his sovereign will. In Psalm 110, it says, "The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." This verse, attributed to a messianic prophecy, emphasizes a position of honor and authority at God's right hand. The right hand of God symbolizes power, victory, divine endorsement. And this imagery is used to highlight the chosen status of the Messiah, who's granted a place of supreme honor and authority by God. In Mark 16, after the Lord Jesus has spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven and he sat at the right hand of God. Jesus' ascension to the right hand of God signifies his ultimate authority and divine election as that Son of God. This position underscores his role as the mediator and the one through whom God executes his will and his blessings. In regard to the sheep and the goats, Matthew 25:33 says, "He will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left." In this parable, Jesus describes the final judgment where those on his right hand, the sheep, are blessed and welcomed into the kingdom. It's prepared for them. This imagery reinforces the notion of divine election, as those on the right hand are chosen for their faithfulness and righteous deeds. Now, in Deuteronomy 33:12, of Benjamin, he said, "The beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him, and the Lord shall cover him all the day long, and he shall dwell between his shoulders." Now, the tribe of Benjamin, whose name means son of the right hand, he receives a unique blessing, highlighting the special status and protection under God's favor. And this illustrates the right hand symbolic conviction to divine election and blessing. Throughout the Bible, the right hand blessing serves as a powerful symbol of divine favor, authority, and election. It represents God's sovereign choice to bestow blessings, protection, and honor upon his chosen individuals or groups, often transcending human expectations and traditions. It underscores the dynamic and gracious nature of God's interactions with humanity, affirming his ultimate authority and the specialist status of those he elects. Join us next time as we discover the first Antichrist.